our computer so we can work. So on your computer, remember we talked about this last time, you're not going to be writing to the desktop or the C drive. We're going to be writing to the P drive. And if you had the class before in here, you already kind of know where that is. If not, you go to Computer, and then you go to P drive. You're going to make a folder on the P drive with your last name underscore F 2016. Okay? So that way we have a folder on our computer that has our name, the semester, and the year. Inside of that folder, make a folder for the class. So this class is 2520. Make a folder for 2520 inside there. You can click the new folder button and then put that in. If at any time I go too fast, you just need a minute to catch up, just tell me. Good so far? All right. Inside the 2520, we're changing things up a little bit from what I've done in the past. So we're going to have two folders in here. One of them is going to be called Finished, and one is going to be called Work. In past semesters, no one's ever really used the source ones the way I told them to, so why bother trying to use those again? So we have a work folder. That's where you're going to put all your work. So whatever you want to put inside that work folder, you put inside that work folder. When something is finished, you're going to drop it into the finished folder so you know, here is my finished copy of Project 1, Project 2, Project 3. Usually what happens is you've turned something in to the server, but you never kept a copy of it. Well, you never want to do that. You want to keep copies of all your stuff. Okay? So there's our two folders. So now that we've done that, let's go back to the P drive. And on the P drive, you have a Maya folder. Okay? On the P drive, there's a Maya folder. Inside the Maya folder is a 2016.5 folder. That's your preferences. Okay? The preferences for these computers are changed throughout the week. So the class coming in after you is going to set up their own preferences. The class coming in on Tuesday, Thursday, they're going to set up their own. So we're going to delete the 2016.5 folder. So we just delete it from there. If you have it. You may not have a Maya folder on your P drive if no one's ever opened up Maya. Okay? And if that's the case, you're all good. You don't have to delete the 2016. And then once it is deleted, then you just open up Maya. And like I said before, we're using Maya 2016 extension 2. If you download Maya 2016 extension 2, you also have to download Mental Ray extension 2 Maya 2016.
Am I going to run into problems if I'm just using the regular 2016?
No, you'll be fine. There's a couple things inside of extension 2 that you won't have, but nothing that we need for the class. All right, so one thing that Maya always does when it comes up is it pops open this front window saying what's new. Do you want to highlight anything that's new inside here? So for most of you, everything is new, so it doesn't really matter. For me, I like to see what the new stuff is, so I leave this on. But I don't like this pop-up because I already know that it's going to highlight the stuff, so I tell it, don't show this at startup. Okay, so click off, don't show at startup, so it doesn't show at startup. Inside of here, remember we have our shelves. And the first thing we did last semester, or whenever you took the intro class, was we set up our own shelf so that we can have our own custom menu items. Okay? So, excuse me. So under custom, go to that custom tab. We want to add in our own shelf items because we want to use these things over and over and over again. So anyone remember the hotkey for that? Yep, Control Shift. So you're going to hold down Control Shift, and we're going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. And all we do is single click it. Okay, we hold down Control Shift, Edit, Delete by Type, History, and single click it. And then you can click back in your screen and verify that you have added a new shelf item up there called Hist. Everyone's cool on the first one so far? Issues? Problems? Yeah, cool. All right, so now we're going to add another one. So hold Control Shift, go to Modify, and go to Center Pivot. All right, so now we have our second item added to the shelf. History and Center Pivot, every 10 minutes I'm usually using one of those, okay? Let's see what else. Under Window, so I'm still holding Control-Shift, I'm going to add the Attribute Editor and the Outliner. So under Windows, Attribute Editor, and Outliner. And what else can we add in here? Let's also add the Node Editor. We'll just add that too. Some of these they've added to the interface, so we don't need to add them to this plus that, so we'll just ignore it. I do want to go to Animation Editors and add the Graph Editor and the Dope Sheet. Everyone's cool so far? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 items. All right. You guys are tranquil. What else do we want to add here? Where is it? Modify, Transformation Tools. No. Snap-Align Objects. Okay. So under Modify Snap-Align Objects, we're going to do a custom one. One of the things that we may want to do, you've been in Illustrator, you've been in InDesign, probably has this too. You have several items just kind of randomly spaced, and you want to evenly space them, right? Or you want to stack them on top of each other, something that we're commonly doing. So under Snap Align Objects, they have this Align Objects thing. We want to customize what that Align Objects does or use it for other stuff. So one way we can do this, we're going to hold Control-Shift, and we're going to click right on the word Align Objects. Okay, so hold Control-Shift and go to Align Objects. So it's under Modify, Snap Align Objects, and then Align Objects. And then you're also going to hold Control-Shift and click on the option box on the far right of it. Okay, so then you can click off once you've done that. All right, so you see we have two icons that look exactly the same in our shelf, right? So this one here is Align Objects. This one here is Align Objects Options. So if we pop that open, we can get to the entire thing, okay? Now, inside here is a couple different settings that we may want to play with. Min, mid, max. I very rarely ever used min or max, okay? I hardly ever would ever use those two items. Mid I use a lot, distribute I use a lot, and stack I use a lot, okay? Now with each one of these, you'll see that we have which direction do you want to align the midpoints, the X, the Y, and the Z, or just the Y, or just the Z. You know, I can switch off this and switch that on. Okay, so there's a lot of different options for this, plus what do I want to align it to, okay? So with that, there's a lot of different things that we can configure for this. So it may be a good thing to have, you know, the option box ready to go with this kind of thing. Now the other one is just literally just it clicks and then it works. So just so you can see how this would work, if I go here and duplicate it, there we go. So I have three objects. If I just grab them and say align, you'll see how it aligns all the objects. Now what happened was the options were set whatever the options were, and they all just kind of like slapped to the center of this. That doesn't help us out. In no way would we ever want that just to happen. So what I want to do is I want to edit this and actually have different instances of the align that would work in the X, the Y, or the Z. So that way I could say line all of them up to the center, boom, they're all centered, or just in the X, or just in the Y, or just in the Z, or whatever. Okay, so let me just see what the key is that. So for everything that we do, oops, I'm going to go into here. This is mid X. I'm going to set it to that. Okay, so I'm just going to hit align and then close this. All right, so now I have a third one, and I'm going to edit it. It probably didn't work because I didn't have items in my scene. Let me go back to my scene. Essentially what I'm trying to do is get to the command that allows me to edit what I'm seeing here. Okay, so I'm going to undo that. I guess that is it. It just didn't work the first time. Okay. So here is the command for what that's doing. Now I want to see what the other options are for this command. Okay, everything inside of Maya is commands. That's all it's doing. Here's a command, here's some options. Here's a command, here's some options. So if I go to help, sure. This brings up your regular Maya help, and if I search for this, perform align objects, scripting, come on. No, command reference. Well, they must have removed it. It wasn't there before. Oh, they just changed it to a line, that's why. Okay, so in some of these, like this one, this says perform align objects. There's actually another command called align that's using the same kind of thing, so we can use that too. Okay, so what we can do is anything that has this little script here, we could customize what we want this to do. So right now it's set to where's my bottom thing? There we go. So I can say align X to the mid, and what that would do, and to make sure that the writing is correct the same way that they have it there, I don't need you anymore, I need you, align dash X mid. Okay, so I put align dash X mid. And then I would say, no, save automatically is on, save all shelves, there we go. So now when I click this, what it's going to do is it's going to align my objects just in the X direction. So let's say that I have this here, I have this here. I grab all of these and I hit that button. You can see how it just aligned them in that one direction. It didn't snap them all on top of each other. It just puts them in that straight line. Okay, if I use this one, they all are basically just right on top of each other. That doesn't help us out any. All right. So we can create these custom shelves that allow us to do that. So this is align-x mid. And then what I can also do is say align to lead, meaning align to the first object or the last object. And notice how I'm doing my capitals. This is very important. I have to have a capital T and a capital L in order for that to work correctly. So I'll close it. I'll create some more objects. I'll grab all three. And you'll see how in this case they all jumped to that first one, okay? Because that was the first one that or the last one I selected. Whichever the last one I select is and I click, you can see how they all align to that. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Can you make like if you keep going down the shelf editor, can you make like a Facebook action sort of thing or Photoshop action sort of thing?
Yes. Yes, I could actually take this and just put more and more lines in there to do whatever I want. Yep. So I could say, let's say I'm making a city, and I know that to make a city, I need to create a cube, randomly size it up, position it here, make another cube, put it next to it, make another cube, put it next to it. I could put all of that inside of this. It's more likely what I would do is make that as a separate script, like this, like that align. That's just a script, and have it call just that new script.
Is there like a record feature or no?
No, there's not. You can while you are doing stuff. It is writing down everything that you're doing. So here's all my commands that I'm doing just right here. Okay, so it is saving the stuff, but for things like make a cube and make it random, there's no function inside there doing that. Okay, so this right here, this command, align space dash X space mid space dash align to lead, that's aligning everything in the X direction. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my shelf here, and instead of this just being called align objects, I'm going to call this, that looks good enough. Let's call that align X. Okay, I could have just put the I in there too. Yes, sir.
Let's have these settings on ours.
Yeah, we'll do that right now. Okay, so you have this first one here. We need to set that first one to do that. So we're going to right click on your first one and go to edit. Okay, now it should say something like perform align object space 0. You need to change it to what mine says, and I'll make it bigger so you can see it. All right, so we can't right now see the names of them. You'll see where those things are, we don't see the name, so everything's just going to look the same. If I have a line X, Y, Z, center, blah, 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 all of these things, they're all just going to be bunched up as one big line, basically. So under our options for the shelves, you'll see that one of these is icon text below. And now I can see what that item is. It says align X. Okay, I could also see that some of my items maybe a little bit too bunched up there, right? Like my attribute editor is actually like pushing stuff around. So I can go into this and just rename some of these. So I know that my center pivot is CP, so I'm just going to name that CP. I know my history is history, so I'll just put history or his. Attribute editor, I'll just put AE. Outliner, I'll just put out. Node editor, graph editor. For my align, I'm going to put align center, but you don't have that one right now. And then for that one, okay, so now they're a little bit nicer placed on the shelf so we can actually see the actual words separated by all the other stuff, okay? So feel free to, at any point, if you're like, okay, well, I get the idea of this, you can always come back and change these things. You don't have, it's not set in stone ever, okay? So now what I want to do is I need to duplicate that command. So inside here, you'll see that there is a new item that I could add. I could trash an item. I don't believe in here, yeah, I can't right click on it here or there. They used to have a duplicate, I guess not anymore. Wah, wah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my command. Oops, went to the wrong one. Go back to my command, and I'm just going to copy it. Okay, so I just highlight the command and hit Control C so I can copy that command. Because I have one for X, I also want one for Y and one for Z. Okay, so I go to my shelves, I add a new one. I call this align Y. I go to the command, and I erase what they have there and just paste my own little script. Okay, and then obviously change the X to a Y. Okay, and then once you're done with that, you know the next step, duplicate it again or make a new one, call it align Z, and then replace it with what you copied and pasted, and then change it to a Z. So on the shelves menu here, we can click on any one of these and use these arrows to move it up or to move it down. You could trash it if you need to. You could also change different things about the specific item. Like if you click on it, it will do this. If you double click on it, it'll do that. Okay, so you can have different things happen depending on how you click on that individual button. You can even have pop-up menu items around that specific thing. I typically don't use those two, just the command one. Okay, so I'm going to save all my shelves. And then what I want you to do is just create a few objects. So I'm just creating objects and just duplicating and just kind of moving them around. And then I'm going to grab them and just try out my align X, align Y, and align Z. All right, so once we have that set up, the next step is to do the other ones, which is distributing and stacking. Okay? So what I did was I ran the script, or I just went to the align objects, I went to distribute, and I went to Y, and I opened up the script editor. The script editor is this button right here. Okay? Basically everything that you do inside of Maya is run by a script. There's some script that's running. You make a sphere, a cube, or a light, it's running a script that creates all the stuff. So whenever I do something like align objects, it's running a script so that I can go see what's that script doing. So this script says align-atl-y dist. Okay? So what do you think ATL means? Look at the last script that we wrote. Align to lead. Okay? So in every script, there's typically two ways you can write it. The long way, which makes more sense because you can read it and understand what it means. And then there's the short form of it. Okay? So when you see something like that, that's the short form of something like this. Okay? And then -y just means it's going in the Y direction. And the only thing that we're seeing here that's different is the dist, right? So this one said mid, this one says dist. So that means distribute. That's the only difference, okay? So if we were to take each one of these things and duplicate them, and then just change the word mid to dist, we should be able to do the exact same thing. We should have the exact same script. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to my shelf. I'm going to make a new item, and it went in the middle, but that's fine, I can move it. I'll say dist X. I'll go to my command. I'll paste it. And I'll make sure that it says dist. And again, I want to make sure that my wording is correct, or my capitals are correct. This has a capital D. If that doesn't have a capital D, it's not going to work. So I'm going to save it and just test it out. Okay, so if I go to my stuff here and just move this, move that, grab my dist X, you'll see that it distributed all of these evenly in the X direction. Okay, so I could say let's align this in the Y direction. There we go. Let's align it in the Z direction. Now let's distribute it in the X. And now they're all evenly spaced. Okay? So this is much quicker than having to go up and pick options for each one of these things. So I'm going to go back and do the exact same thing. Go back to my shelf. I'm just going to scoot this down so it's at the bottom. And then I'm going to copy that command, make a new one, and distribute in the Y direction. Okay, and then do the same thing for Z. Okay, so we have midpoints lined up, we have our distribution lined up, right? So how do we find out what stack is going to be? What's the command for stack? How do we know that one? We can use the help. So in the help, let's see. It doesn't help. Nope. If the help doesn't help us, because it's not helping us, because it should have it listed, it's not. What we would have to do is we would have to just run the command. So if I grab everything and I go to my snap align and I just do it. So I just say, let's see what it's going to be inside a stack, align, If I go to my script editor again, there we go. It's just the word stack. Now sometimes it's going to be really obvious, it's the word stack, but sometimes it's not. Like if you were to create a sphere, if I type the word sphere, it will create a sphere. But what if I wanted a polygon or a NURB sphere? Those have different commands for which kind I'm getting, okay? So now we're going to do the same thing, just change it to stack, okay? So we're going to go back to our shelf editor. I'm going to click on the bottom this time. Stack X. And just change the word dist to stack. I'll make sure it's capital. Yes, it is. All right, so there's our commands. Now you'll see from mine, like my screen's kind of smaller because I'm up on the projector screen, but it's actually a good example because look at where my stuff ended up. Like my stack is down here, and my distribution and align are up there. So it's actually like pretty difficult for me to use this because everything is kind of like shifted, okay? So we're gonna use another tool that's gonna help us out. So your shelves only take you so far, because again, we always have to go up to the shelf, right? It'd be much more convenient if we had something right at our fingertips wherever we're working, where we could probably do something like this and still work as efficiently as we were, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make our own marking menu, okay? So you know how you do, that, and then when a menu pops up, and you can do this and a menu pops up, and you can do that and a menu pops up. We're going to make one of those for our hotkeys, okay? And they're pretty easy to do. Under Window, Settings, Preferences, we're going to go to the Marking Menu Editor. Okay, Window, Settings, Preferences, Marking Menu Editor. And what this has is all those marking menus that we would typically see. So just to scoot this off for a second, when you're in the hotbox like this, you may not have noticed this, but there's actually a hotbox over here that has a bunch of stuff. There's a hotbox over here, there's a hotbox here, and there's another menu there, okay? So there's menus like literally all over the place, kind of hidden inside of Maya. So what we want to do is we want to create our own marking menu. So hit the Create Marking Menu. You may have to kind of shuffle things around on your screen just so you can see it. I definitely have to do that to mine. And what I'm going to do is, this is the marking menu creator. So what I don't want to do is stacking, distributing, aligning things. I use those kind of rarely, okay? When I'm doing a scene and I have a bunch of stuff I need to stack or align or whatever, I want to be able to go to that menu and do that. But I don't use it kind of on a daily basis, okay? So I'm going to make two menus, actually. I'm going to make one for all this stuff here that's stacking and aligning. Then I'll make another one for these things here, which I would use on a daily basis. Like a hourly basis, I'm using those constantly bouncing around. All right, so I'm going to call this menu Align Menu. Okay, don't put any spaces, any funny characters, just keep it Align Menu. And then all we have to do is middle drag our stuff right into here where we want it to be. So my Align X, I'm going to drag here. Align Y, I'll drag there. Align Z, I'll drag there. And then Distribute X, Distribute Y. Okay, so you just middle mouse button drag them right into those spots. If you need to remove one, you can right click on it and remove it. I like to keep things kind of in a way that makes sense. So all of my aligns are on one row. All of my distributes are on one row. Okay? Now this leaves, there's two spots. So I could definitely put two of the stacks there, but then again, they're not bunched up together, and I don't like that. So down here on the left is a single box. So I'm going to drag, scoot you over. I'm going to drag one of my stacks there, and it makes another box. And then I can drag my other stack there, and then I can drag my other stack there. You can click here to test, and it'll show you your menu. If you don't want the options, you can right-click and say Edit, and then say don't need the option box. Because realistically, we don't need the option box for any of these, and it's just going to be annoying to see that. So I'm just going to right-click on each one of these and remove the option box. Much better. All right, now it kind of bugs me that there's a different icon for Align X than everything else, but it's so small, I'm just going to ignore it as best I can, okay? But I could go back and fix it, and maybe I will someday, but that'll get the job done, okay? So now all of these things would work. If I had objects clicked, I went to that, it would actually align stuff, okay? So then you're going to hit Save once you're done. And then Close. Okay, so we've created a marking menu, we've saved it, we've closed it, but what we haven't done yet is actually assigned it to something, because it doesn't know how we want to pop it up or where we want to use it. So on here, I have to tell it that I want to use the marking menu. So down here it says Use Marking Menu In, and I'm going to say the Hotkey Editor. Okay, so by telling it it's going to be in the Hotkey Editor, I can assign a hotkey so that when I hit a certain key combination with the left mouse, then that marking menu will pop up and I can use it whenever I want. So I'm going to say Apply, and then Close. And then Window Settings Preferences, Hotkey Editor. All right, so now this, you may have to move it to your screen so you can see it. Mine, I had to resize it just so I could see it. It's showing you right now hotkeys that are already assigned to stuff, okay? So all of these ones that are in blue already have something assigned to it. So obviously I wouldn't want to overwrite something that's important. Like if I change it to S, that's set key. So that may screw me up for animation class, because now every time I hit S, it's going to be my marking menu. If you hold Alt, those are the hotkeys with Alt assigned to it. If you hold Control, those are the ones with Control assigned to it. If you hold Shift, those are the ones with Shift assigned to it. And you can do combinations. So Alt Control Shift has nothing assigned to it. Oh yeah, except for the minus. I'm not sure what that is. Alt Shift is that. Now what I want to do is make something that makes sense to me. So like aligning, stacking, and distributing is the three things that we're doing. So essentially we're aligning things, okay? So I really want to use the A so that it's easier for me to remember A, align, okay? So that's just mentally how I'm going to remember that. So as I use Control, Shift, and Alt, it looks like the A is pretty much taken everywhere except when I hit Control, Alt, and Shift, okay? Yeah, Control Alt. Oh, there you go. I'm just going to hit Control Alt Shift. That's going to be easier for me to remember. Okay, so now that I know Control Alt Shift A is available, I'm going to go to my thing here, menu items, custom scripts. There we go. So under the Edit Hotkeys for, go to Other Items. Every Maya version, they change how they do this. edit hotkeys for other items. There we go. Way on the bottom it says user marking menus. We're going to open that up. And what we should see is our menu that we made, and it says align menu press and align menu release. Okay, so we don't touch the release. Maya takes care of that automatically. So we're going to click on the Maya align menu press right here. And we're going to hold down Control Alt Shift and click A. Come on. Maybe not. Hold on. Oh, there it is. We have to click over here. Sorry. Click right here on the right of this. It was kind of dim on my screen. And then we can hit Control Alt Shift A. There we go. All right. Now we get a little warning inside there. The warning says your marking menu will not work correctly unless you attach it to a release hotkey. Also, do you want us to do that for you? Of course, anything you can do to help. So we hit yes. Okay. So we clicked in that area, Control Alt Shift A, hit yes, go ahead, and then we can save and close.
What if I got rid of that automatic thing?
Then you can just add it again, and then it should ask for it. So inside here, Control Alt Shift A, click, there's my menu. And I can align that with the Y direction. I could stack them in the Y direction.
So Sean,
Mm-hmm.
if we have these,
So now let's quickly go through, because now we've done it before with this more complex one. Let's go through and just make a new marking menu and set it up for the other stuff. So Window, Settings, Preferences, Marking Menu. Create a marking menu. And this one I'm going to call Hot Items. You can call it whatever you want. It's your preferences. When you're in this class and you're working on stuff, the workflow you should get into is the fastest workflow for you, okay? Not the fastest workflow for you right now, but the fastest workflow possible for you. So if you're constantly going to a menu item, what you should say is, I need to either assign a hotkey to that menu item or put it into my menu item box, my marking menu, whatever. So now I'm just going to middle drag common things, okay? Now this one is a little bit more particular how I do this. So things that I'm constantly going to, history and center pivot. So I want those to be in easy to access areas like the left side or the right side. Attribute editor, constantly going there. So I'll pop that up at the top. Outliner, I'll put that at the bottom. Node editor, don't go to too often. Graph editor, not too much. And dope sheet, not too much. Test my stuff out. Whoops. You'll see that all of my stuff works. There's no options or whatever else, so I'm good to go. So I can just hit save and then close. All right, now how do I called it Hot Items. How do I get this available in the Hotkey Editor?
change hotkey to hotkey editor.
Yep, use marking menu in Hotkey Editor. And then we apply the settings, and then we close the box. And then we go to the Hotkey Editor. There we go. Shift Alt C. Nope, that's not going to be good.
Maybe Control Shift Z or Control Shift C. That we can keep it with our original menu that we created.
Yeah, that'd be good. All right, Control Alt Shift Z. There we go. And then apply it. And then save save and close. All right, now that, just for future reference on other ones, the hotkey that we set that up to, it's a pretty complex one, right? Holding down those 4 buttons essentially, plus the left mouse, that can be kind of a pain to do. But we have to keep in mind too that we don't actually use every hotkey that's in Maya, right? The hotkey list I gave you, like I said, that's like the list of things that I'll constantly use every day. So if there's one on there that you know that we're probably not going to use, you can use that as your hotkey. So even though it's assigned to something else, like C or S or A or whatever, you can overwrite that. Okay.
What's curve snap?
What's that?
What's curve snap?
C is curve snap, so where you can snap an object right on top of it. But Shift C is something else.
So it's curve snap.
It's curve snap, but it's something else too.
Curve snap press and release. So they're both, I guess.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so if I hold down Shift and hit C, that's going to take away the hotkey from curve snap, but C is also curve snap, so it's kind of like using 2 hotkeys for one. Shift A is frame all in all views, and you can see when I type that in, it says, hey, this is what it's assigned to, do you want to overwrite that? And at that point you could say, I'm never going to need that. Why would I need to frame everything in all views? Because realistically, I never use that. I usually work in one view, so I don't need to use that. So I could say, yes, overwrite it, and yes, set up my release for me. And now it's, wait, I'm on Shift A. Hold on. No, it says Alt-Shift-A, but I don't know why it says that. Whatever. It works. And then the same thing for this one. I could do, yeah, now it says it right. What is this one? Shift-S. And this one is set to keyframe tangent marking menu. I'd never use that. Yes and yes. Okay? So now I've just simplified the hotkeys that I need. Shift-A, Shift-S right next to each other. Okay? So for anything that you're doing, feel free to change your own marking menu items, but don't get away from stuff that is obviously important to you having that. So I wouldn't want to assign something to Q, W, E, R, T, Y. Those are my hotkeys for moving, rotating, and scaling, so that would kind of screw up my workflow. Okay? So I'm going to save and then save and close. Verify everything's working, which it is. Much easier to even manipulate my hand on the keyboard than trying to do whatever I just had set up previously. Okay, and then this custom shelf, I can just not even use that. I can use these other shelves now, and then I'm still free to use this. Attribute has popped up. Center pivot is already there. Outliner popped up. Cool. See, so everything's working the way that it should be working. All right, the next thing we want to do is we want to set up some more of our preferences inside of our scene. So in the bottom right, you see a little running guy being chased by a gear. We want to click on that running guy being chased by a gear. These are our preferences. And our preferences inside of Maya are very specific to the task that we're going to be doing. For this class, we're going to set up certain preferences. If you're in the 2540, the preferences may vary slightly, but you can still use them for either class. Okay? So I like to start at the top because it's always good every version of Maya you go into to look at the top and just see if they've added new stuff in there. Okay. One of the things we'll find in the interface is it says highlight new items. So remember that box that popped up at the beginning? That's where we could turn that off or change the color if we wanted to. Everything looks cool, so I'm just going to leave it. Interface scaling, that's a new one. I don't remember seeing that before. Here's UI elements. So different things that might be in the UI. So in case our status line gets turned off, see my menu item up here went away. So that's where we can turn things on and off. Our shelf went away. Our time slider went away. So we can turn things on right inside of this. There's a view cube that's typically right here. It's kind of like an outdated thing. So it's on, but it's not really showing up right now, which is fine. Display is all cool. Nothing here new. I'm going to go down to settings, okay? In this class, it's going to be a little bit more imperative that we understand our increments that we're working in. So Maya right now is set up to use centimeters as our size. So what that means is that if we're modeling a room, we need to model the room to scale in order for it to look like it's actually to scale, okay? For the lighting to work, for any dynamics to work, for everything to kind of fit correctly, we have to make sure that we're putting it in there. So in the intro class, we were kind of arbitrarily moving, scaling, rotating things. In this, we're going to be a little bit more precise as far as sizing goes. So with this being centimeters, we would figure out how tall a typical room is. These look like they're 10-foot ceilings. And then we would go into here, and we would type in 10 feet 2 centimeters. And that would be 304 centimeters. So if I was to build this room, I would want to make sure that my floor or my room was at least 300 centimeters tall. It doesn't have to be 304.8. 300 is sufficient, okay? And we like to keep these centimeters because this translates into other programs pretty well. If we change it to inches or feet or miles, I think that's even one of their things. Yards, I think it's the highest. It could kind of screw up if we went to another program. Okay, so I leave that as centimeters. We're also dealing with our timestamp of 24 frames a second. That's perfectly fine. In the animation class, we go to 30 frames a second. You could set that to 30 if you want. Also pay attention to our up axis. Maya uses Y as the up axis. A lot of programs don't. So like any CAD program that I've ever used, Z has always been the up axis, okay? And whenever I go to print something, when I take a model from Maya and I go to print it, it always comes in like this. Because in the other program, Y is this way, I have to rotate everything so it prints correctly, all right? So just pay attention to that. If you get a model, you may have to rotate it. If you send this to a CAD program, you may have to rotate it before you send it. Animation, everything here should be good. Assets should be fine. Cameras should be fine. Cameras. Right here, see where we have a near clipping plane and a far clipping plane, okay? Your camera basically has stopping points to it. So right in front of the camera is 0.1 units, okay? So pretend that I'm the camera. 0.1 units in front of me, or 0.1 centimeters in front of me, is when I start to see stuff. Everything here I don't see. And then 1 or 10,000 units I see all the way over here, but I don't see anything past that 10,000 units. So sometimes you may see what's called clipping, where your object looks like it's transparent or it's being cut off. Just to exaggerate this, I'm going to get really close to this object here. There you go. So see this here, how that's being cut off? That's my near clipping plane cutting that off. If I'm rendering this and I need to see that close to it, I need to make sure that that near clipping plane is closer to the camera. And my far clipping plane, okay, you don't really see it because it's so tiny, but let me make a bigger shape. Let me make a plane. There we go. So there's my far clipping plane being cut off. So at some point we may need to adjust our clipping plane depending on how big our scene is. This plane that I just created is 8,156 centimeters, which sounds big, but it's only 267 feet. Okay, so imagine we're doing a building like a skyscraper. That's not that many feet, right? If we're doing a street and we have a bunch of buildings inside there, that's not that many. We're doing a whole city, that's not that many, right? So we may need to adjust our stuff as we go. The reason we don't adjust this right away is because this kind of helps Maya be more optimal, okay? Imagine that you can see everything and you can absorb everything. It would be just like a lot of input and a lot of overflow. So Maya just says, I want to focus on this area, so that's what we use it for. This is especially useful for things like, let's say you have a city and you're only working on one building. We can focus just on that one building without loading in all the memory for the other stuff. Color management should be fine. Dynamics is fine. Files and projects. Is this what it is? Yes. So one issue that everyone always has is this guy, autosave. If you don't mind redoing stuff, leave autosave off. If you do mind redoing stuff, then turn autosave on. Okay, so enable autosave, and then you can specify how many minutes between each autosave. Okay, so right now it's at 10 minutes. So 10 minutes from now, if I would have saved my project, Maya would automatically save it again and then save it again every 10 minutes. So I'm basically only have to redo 10 minutes worth of work and not, like some people had last semester, 3 hours worth of work. Okay?
Does it override the same file?
It actually saves it to a different destination. So it'll say whatever your file name is, .autosave.mb.
Will you have like 6 of them if you're working on it for an hour?
You would have 6 of them if you're working for an hour. That's where you can say limit, and that way it'll basically do 10 of them, and then when it does the 11th, it deletes the first one. Okay? And then every time you hit Control S to save it, it still saves yours, and then your autosaves are just still in the background. Okay? Destination project is fine. That's I don't limit it. My files right now aren't that big. If we were working on a car or something enormous, yeah, we'd want to limit it because basically every time we saved it, it would be huge. But our files aren't going to be enormous yet. Preferred renderer. We can choose Mental Ray from this list. Right now we're going to be dealing with Mental Ray, but like I've said before, we're going to be bouncing out of Maya and using other renderers. We'll be using KeyShot, we'll be using VRED, we'll be using Unreal, we'll be using several other programs to do our stuff. But there's no reason really to have this on Maya software. That's just pointless. Selection is fine. Snapping, time slider, undos. There we go. The next one we'll go to is undos. On undo, we have 50 undos. So when you hit the Z key, you can hit it 50 times and then stuff stops undoing. Okay? If you've done a lot of work and you need to undo more than 50, you may want to set this up higher. As a student, you may want to go up as high as 200. I would not go any higher than that. There's an infinite button. I would not hit the infinite button because then that's just going to eat up all your memory on your system, because everything from selecting to deselecting to whatever is an undo. Okay, so 200 is usually a good number for students to go to. For me, it's actually quicker just to figure out what the issue is, delete stuff, and rebuild it than try to undo 200 times. Okay?
You leave it off?
No, I'm living on the wild side. Come on.
Crazy.
GPU cache, that's fine. XGen module. All right, everything else is good. So we'll hit save. All right, that should be good there. All right, so we're going to go to File, and we're going to say Save Preferences. Not yet. Well, you can go to Save Preferences anyway. Where's it at? There it is, Save Preferences. All right, when we go to File, Save Preferences, what that does is that hotkey that we made, the marking menu we made, those preference changes to the animation preferences, all that stuff gets saved. Before that, none of it was saved. If Maya crashed, we may have lost all that information, okay? But luckily, it saved it for us, or we saved it, so we're good to go. All right, so a couple other things I want to do. This is just me. I like the attribute editor to be pulled out. I don't like it to be nestled, so I'm pulling out my attribute editor, okay? The reason I don't is because, and this is just a annoyance. So every time I hit Control A to bring up the attribute editor, do you see how it redraws my screen? Okay? Imagine I had something very complex in there, like a full-blown car with engine and all this other stuff. Every time I hit Control A, it's going to try to redraw that entire shape. Okay? So I pull it out, and now when I hit Control A, it just pops it open. So it doesn't affect what is in my view. Plus, I can drag this off screen. All right, that should be good there. All right. Cool. Let's make a project. So let's go to File, Project Window. And we're going to say New Project. Let's call this our last name underscore primers. And we're going to put this inside of our folder. So I'm going to hit the folder location. And put this in my work folder.
Could you do that again?
Yep. So we first clicked New, gave it a name, Sarcona Primers. Then we went to the location here and just put it right inside of our P drive Sarcona 2520 work. All right, cool. So now we have a project. So every time we come into Maya, if we're starting something new, we're going to make a new project. If we're coming in and we're working on a project we've already started, we're going to set our project location. So you don't need to do this because you just created a project, but just so you can see, every time you come in, you're going to go to Set Project. And you're going to say, I'm working on whatever project you're working on, and then you're going to hit Set. And that way we know that project is set. That way Maya knows what we're working on. Okay? So what I want to do is, let's just, for the start of this, we're going to make a little environment. So let's create a cube. And I'm going to go to scale, and I'm just going to scale this up to, let's say, 60. That's a good size. 60, 60, 60. Okay, remember you can click and drag on the scale numbers and change them all at once. So if I go whoop, and then type 60, it'll change all three of them. Okay, I want to use the box as kind of like a surround for what I'm going to put inside my scene. So I'm going to delete the top, this side, and that side. So I'm going to right click and go to face and just delete these three pieces. Okay, just so we have the inside of the box. And then I can right click and go back to object mode. Now you'll see that your box is black on the inside, and if we spin it around, it's gray on the outside. So every surface inside of Maya has a top and a bottom, basically, or an inside and an outside. So the black is showing us that that's the inside of the surface, the gray is the outside of the surface. It's kind of annoying to see that. So under the lighting menu, I'm just going to say use two-sided lighting. So basically it's just the lighting isn't hitting the other side. So that's much nicer. See?
Are you doing this for, is it just this object, or you want us to change your settings to that, or?
No, it'll be for this object. We'll have to do this for every scene, basically. Okay. So now I have just this kind of blank area, and if I hit 3, you'll see how my cube now becomes this nice little backdrop. Okay. So now we have basically a curved or coved backdrop that we can put an object in for lighting or texturing or whatever else. So one thing that we want to always experiment with is trying to find the right look to an object. So it's not so much that we want what we know we're going to grab a wood material and drop it on, it's going to look like wood, or we're going to pray that it looks like wood. We want to test it out and do some settings to it to give it the look of the wood before we actually apply it in our scene. So some people's job is just to do what's called shader development or texture building, where their job is literally just to build textures that someone else will use. So I'm going to create a polygon. Is there a new one in here? No. I'm going to create a polygon sphere. Size it up to, let's say, I don't know. We'll make it about 5. And I'm just going to kind of stick it in the middle of this area. Okay, so I scaled up to about 5. It's kind of floating in the middle of nowhere. And see where I have mine positioned. Good, everyone's good so far?
Just on the, I didn't hear what you did. You just said to change the black to gray.
Under lighting, use two-sided lighting.
Okay. So we have this ball kind of floating in the middle of nowhere. I'm going to create a light for it. So create lights. And in the class, in this class, for most things, we're going to use an area light. Okay. There are some specific options or areas where I would use a point light or a directional or a spotlight. But for most things, we would use an area light. There's a physical area light. Don't use that one. Use this regular area light here. Okay, so I'm just scaling it up, moving it back. And there's a little stick sticking out of the front of it. I want that little stick to shine right on the center of that ball. All right, and while I'm doing this, anytime I say let's position a light here and get it this size, don't ever think that we're locked into that and you need to get it perfect before you can move on to the next step. As long as you have a light in your scene, you can move on to the next step and just come back and adjust its position or its rotate or its scale or any of the other properties. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the attribute editor for the light. So I hit Control A, or I can use my marking menu that I had. And some things that I'm always going to change when I do lighting is the decay rate. Decay rate always has to be quadratic. Okay? Light has a natural way of moving. The light from the projector screen is not as bright over here as it is coming right out of the projector. Okay? The lights at the very back of the room, if I turned one of those on, they wouldn't project as brightly way back there as they would up here. Okay? Or vice versa. So that's what's called the decay rate. That light's intensity dropping off over time, okay, or over space. So we set that to quadratic, and that's the most realistic look. Now when we do this, the intensity is basically not doing anything, okay? It's kind of like a 1 watt light bulb. So I'm going to crank this up to 1,000. Okay? So the intensity is at 1,000. Now it may have to be 10,000 or 12,000 or a trillion. Okay, we don't know until we actually hit the render button as to what it's going to do. A scene that we're focusing on, let's say I put an area light here for this guy because he has a light on him. This distance here, I'm going to use a lot less intensity than something on a billboard that's shining on an entire city. Okay, so we have to be aware that in every instance it's going to be different. Don't get locked to, he said 1,000, doesn't look good at 1,000, right? We have to adjust to that. All right, so these two things we always change. I'm going to scroll down to the mental ray area, and I'm going to say I want to use the light shape. Okay, so what this is going to do is we have a light coming out of here. I didn't know this could turn. We have a light coming out of here. And right now, this light is a certain shape. There's 2 light bulbs on the side of this, and those 2 light bulbs are a certain size, and they cast light. Okay? Without saying use the light shape, Maya basically ignores the light shape. Okay? The light could be enormous, it could be tiny, it doesn't care. It's not using the shape at all. If we say use the light shape, what it's going to do is a bigger light is going to have more illumination to it. Okay, the shadows will also be a lot softer because it's a bigger light. So we want that use light shape to be on. I'm also going to take my samples here to 1. So all my samples are 1, 1, 1. Okay, and what this does is it controls the quality of it. Now I took the samples from 8 to 1. In our minds we think, well, that's going to take the quality of this down. That's not what happens. What happens is in Mental Ray, it says, oh, that's set to 1, then I will take care of all the quality settings on this. If we set it to 0, that means 0. That means there is no quality. If I set it to 2, that means we're going to control it. But if I set it to 1, Mental Ray knows I'll take care of the quality settings for this specific item. So I set this to 1, I set that to use light shape, I set this to 1000, I set that to quadratic. Those 4 things, every single area light that I do, I set to. Okay? So if you ever make an area light, those are the 4 settings you need to start with. So now I'm going to kind of zoom out a bit, like that. And then I'm going to hit my render button. Render the current frame. And what we should see is that I do get some illumination on here. Make sure, if you haven't already, that you are in Mental Ray if it didn't choose Mental Ray. And then you can hit the render button again to see your item. Now this is a little bit too dark for me. Some of yours may be dark already, like yours is completely dark. Alright, so I'm going to hit the Control A on the light again and just crank this intensity up. And again, don't be gentle with it. 1005 is not going to do anything. I need to go to maybe 2000 or 5000 or 10,000. I'm actually going to go to 5000.
It had accidentally gotten set back to the original, not to 1000, so that's
Oh.
it used to actually be really good, but it kind of fixed itself.
Alright, so now we have just a basic light coming from one side. Now that I have a basic light from one side, I want to duplicate the light, bring it around to the other side, and give some natural light hitting on that side. But dimmer, I don't want to wash the surface out. So by dimming it, I could pull this light further away, or I could take the intensity down, or I could do a combination of both. Alright, so the next thing we want to do in this scene is we want to start adding materials to this. So right now we're using default Lambert materials. So Lambert 1, which is our default gray that we always get, that's what we're seeing. We're rendering with Mental Ray. Lambert 1 is a Maya software kind of default junky shader. So we want to actually use a Mental Ray shader while we're in Mental Ray. It just makes everything more realistic, more accurate. So I'm going to close my render view and I'm going to assign a Mila to the background. So I'm going to right click on it, go down to assign new material, and then in the Mental Ray section on the left we should see something called Mila, and it's the one with all the colors on it. Mila material. We just click on it. Okay. It's most likely going to pop open the incorrect tab. It always, for me anyway, it pops open the shading group. We want to go to the right tab that doesn't have the big red X, and it has the little ball that we can color. So I'm going to leave it at the default color of this. We don't need anything fancy for the background. The background is usually just a white color anyway. But we do want to label it, okay? So as we start working on things, organization is obviously key. So I'm just going to call this background underscore Mila. Okay, so we right clicked on the background, we went down to assign new material, and then we went to Mental Ray, found a Mila, and then changed its name to background underscore Mila. Cool so far?
Yeah.
Cool. So now let's do the same thing to the ball. Assign a new material to the ball. We'll also assign a Mila. We'll call it ball underscore Mila. And what I want to do is I want to use this scene as a way to experiment with different kinds of shaders. Okay? So one of the things that we are always trying to do is recreate stuff that happens out in the real world. There's certain materials that we are constantly going back to and constantly redoing. wood, glass, metal, plastic, rubber, one more,
Copper.
not so much copper. Those are the 5 I can think of right now, okay? So those 5 are ones that we're constantly kind of thinking or constantly redoing in some format, okay? Maybe cement, that's the other one maybe. So what I want to do is I want to create a material for each one of these. So after the ball in the name, I'm going to put an underscore, and I'm just going to call this one cement. Okay, we'll do the cement one first. Thinking of stuff that's industrial, that's typically where we would have that. And a lot of things can be derived from that. We can change some of them. So if it's redwood versus oak versus something else, we could change all of those things. All we've done so far is we assigned a Mila to the background and just left it at the default. And we assigned a Mila to the ball. And we just renamed them accordingly. All right. What we need to do is we need to go to CG Textures or textures.com. If you don't have a site, you can sign up for a site or sign up for an account. It's free. You get 15 free downloads every day. And what we want to do is we want to find textures that support those kinds of things. So I want to find a good wood texture, a good plastic texture, a good metal texture, and so on. Okay? Now, as we look for these, they're going to be an array of different things. So I'm going to log in first just so we can see this.
You ever use just Google search?
Google search doesn't allow me royalty-free usage. So if I ever decided that I wanted to make money off of this stuff, I couldn't do that. Oh, come on.
If you use a workflow, how they tell that they workflow if you did like a wrong.
What was that?
If you did like a wrong.
You can
put
change the search.
workflow in there, how could they even tell?
They wouldn't, right? I mean, realistically, they wouldn't. However, let's say the company comes in, probably never happened ever. The guy comes in who did a drawing or the picture of brick that you stole off of Google. He says, I want to see your assets. And you show them, here's my assets and here's this picture. Obviously, you can get in big trouble for that, okay? Just good habits to get into, especially when you consider this isn't you on the line, this is a company on the line, all right? So it's free, might as well use it. Now they have added some neat new stuff to this, 3D brushes, 3D scans, and Substance. Substance is a very neat tool. I'm just gonna segue or take a sidestep into this real quick just to show you.
You can search it for label for reuse, by the way.
Right, you can do that too, but they really don't have a lot of stuff. So Substance Painter is something that allows you to create textures in a different fashion. So one of the ways that we'll eventually create textures is by painting textures on there. So if I want metal, I find a picture of metal, and I'm basically using like the clone stamp to paint it onto an object. What Substance allows you to do is use a flat metal as like an underlying color, and then damage it up using the software. So if you want to be like, oh, there should be rain spots on this thing, you can paint with a brush called a particle brush, and it'll simulate what rain streaks would be doing to the object. Or you can say, I want to see what sand would be like this on a plane, and it'll blow sand onto the object and make it look like there's some kind of sand damage to this. So it's a really neat tool that you can use. So this is a mix of regular textures plus Substance textures mixed in here. And if I look up Substance, all right, so I'm going to go in here and find some cool textures. So we're doing concrete first. So I want to find a base concrete, okay? What we don't want to do is find something that's very specific to a scene. I want to find something that's just very generic looking. So something like this bunker wall, that's not going to do me any good because that's very one-off kind of thing that I would use. Even like this new concrete that has a bunch of holes in it, that's no good. I want to find something like this bare concrete. That should be a pretty good photo. And that one looks good. Got it. All right, now as we're looking at some of these textures, a couple of things we want to notice. One is the file size. So each one of these ones here, you'll see this is a small and it's free, and I can download this one and it's 1024 pixels, okay? So what that means is this image is 1,000 pixels like that. If I needed to put this into a huge scene, it'd be very difficult to do that because I would have to duplicate it a whole bunch of times, and it may, even though this one says that it's seamless, we may see an actual seam inside there. This one over here I can get to be a bigger size, but I can see that there's already some indicators here that I definitely wouldn't be able to tile that one. Okay, if I tiled that one, meaning that I took a copy of it and put it next to it and then put that next to it, it would be obvious that I'm using the same texture over and over again. So in all cases, you want to grab the biggest picture you can grab while being stingy on your credits. You have 15 credits a day, so this is 2 credits, so I want to make sure that I download the biggest one. But if I'm in a pinch and I just need something, I may just grab the smaller one. So I'm going to grab something that looks pretty like this. There's too much of this. There's too much stuff going on here. I can't really use that. That one's okay. This one is okay. I'm going to grab this one, okay? Because it's the most kind of overall plain looking. I can airbrush or clone stamp that out if I need to. So I click on it, I save it, and I'm downloading it just to my folder. Okay, so now I'm going to go find a wood that has the same kind of thing. So I'm going to go into the wood area and try to find just a basic kind of wood, not burned wood, not wood ends, like a fine wood. All right, so I downloaded 3. I downloaded concrete, downloaded metal, and I downloaded wood. Okay? I'm not going to walk you through each one of those downloadings, but obviously it would be the same process. You want to find the best texture that is kind of the most generic looking. You don't want to find something that's very specific. I don't want to find a piece of metal corrugated, or a container piece of metal, or something that has leaks on it, or something that's just, you know, I wouldn't use in an everyday instance.
But they not letting me download it. Can I screenshot it?
Okay, so I'm going to take these textures here and I'm going to put them inside of my P drive, Sarcona 2520, work, primers, source images. Okay, so any textures we get, we have to download and put inside of the source images for whichever project we're working on. Okay, so I just copy the textures to the P drive in my folder, 2520, work, primers, source images.
Would you, was there a max? Would you like to say for as far as like the actual texture itself, that like not too big or not too small?
Well, here's the
Maya
thing with
struggle
all of
something
them.
that's large?
Maya will kind of freak out if it's too large. So at one point I had, and I have to renew it, I had the full account. So I could download pretty much anything as much as I want, more than I ever needed. So whenever I downloaded something, it's a lot now, it never was this much, but this one is 6,000 by 7,000 pixels. I would download the biggest one I could because I know I can always go down. If I need a 5K by 5K or 500 by 500 pixel image, I could make that in Photoshop just by resizing it. Okay. If I start off small, nothing I can do about that. You can go smaller, but you can't go any bigger. All right.
Yep.
All right, so I have my ball back in Maya. My images are inside my source images folder. I'm going to click on the color area here, the little swatch on the far right. And then I'm going to go to File to connect my file to it. So this one was concrete, so I'm going to go to concrete. And then when I hit 6, what I should see is concrete on that ball. Okay. Now, one thing that we should have done a long time ago is what? Save, right? We haven't saved a single thing, at least I haven't.
Turn on autosave.
Nope, you don't. It hasn't saved yet, so it's not auto-saving.
What?
Yeah, really. At least I don't think it is.
Why is that autosave?
So save your stuff, Control S, put it inside your scenes folder, and call it texture setup _01. Okay. So we have a sphere. The sphere has concrete on it. We've labeled our stuff. We've saved our stuff.
I don't think, do you have to put the 01 in there, or is it automatic?
I put the 01 in there. On that, on the archives or the autosaves, it'll add other stuff to it. All right. So then I'm gonna hit render again, and then you'll see that I'm getting something that looks a little bit more appealing to look at. Now we actually have some sort of concrete appearance inside there. Okay. Now a couple of things we want to take a look at on this File tab here. On the top you see that it says quadratic right here. Where have we seen quadratic before?
Lights.
The light. Okay. The light's decay is quadratic in how it drops off. In this instance, it's not a drop off, it's a filter, and the filter is basically softening our texture. All right? So most of the time you want this filter type off. So what that's going to do is it's not going to soften your material, it's not going to soften that texture, and so something like concrete that might be kind of grainy and gravelly, that will read correctly. If you have the filter on, then it's going to soften it too much and it'll just look like, I don't know, foamy.
Hey, Sean,
Uh,
let's see where
I saved my first image. So I rendered it out with the quadratic filter set to on, and then I hit this button to save whatever that image was. I turned it off, then I set the render again. So here it is without the filter. There it is with it. So you see the amount of detail that kind of gets lost when we have that filter on there? Okay, right here, it's a bit crisper. We're getting a lot more of the grain work than we are there, especially around these edges. We're really losing some of that grain. Now in this, it's not like a huge deal because it's not very apparent. Like I have to show you the before and after before you can actually see the difference. If this was text, like on a product label, the text would all be blurry. We could barely read it. Okay. So we have to make sure that we're aware of where these things are that we're going to be changing. All right, so I'm going to click back on the ball and go back to the Mila. And what I want to do is have some other settings in here. So underneath the material properties, there's an overall bump to this. Okay. Now the overall bump right now is not going to do a whole lot. I need some sort of reflection. The bump is relied on specularity, on reflection, so I need to have some sort of reflection. So under my base component, right here, I'm going to say that I want this to be reflective plastic. Okay? Reflective plastic is just a good kind of starting point for doing something like concrete. So we get a couple options. One is Glossy Blend, one is Glossy Roughness, and one is Fresnel IOR. Okay, so Glossy Blend is the amount of reflectivity. So I take this down to 0, I have no reflection. I take this up to 1, and I have the entire thing being reflective. Okay? The glossy roughness is how sharp those reflections are. Okay, so think of something like a piece of chrome that's super reflective and there's no roughness to it at all, right? It's super smooth. So for something like chrome, it may be something like that. Really sharp reflection, really chromy, okay? For something like a brushed metal, that roughness is just going to come up more and more. As you are in this class, look around at different things. So when you're sitting at your desk, let's say you have a wooden desk at home, look at the reflections, look at the bump, look at the grain, look at how the light interacts with it. That's how you're going to start to understand what these surfaces are doing. This thing here, this piece of plastic right here, it has reflections to it, but they're not clear. They're blurred. They're rough. So for something like this, even though this isn't rough, the reflections are because they're kind of diffused and spread out. So for something like concrete, we could look at different pieces of concrete, but in my mind, what I'm picturing is that for the most part, concrete isn't very reflective. So I'm going to take my glossy blend pretty much down like that, like maybe to 0.075. Okay. And then for the roughness, I'm going to crank the roughness pretty much up because it's not going to be sharp. Okay. The other area right here, the Fresnel IOR. So as lights hit an object and they bounce off and we see reflections, that changes depending on how we're looking at it. If you watch the next time you're driving in a car and it's not a pouring down rainy day, but it's kind of a sunny day, look at the reflections of the car right in front of you, and then look at the edge reflections. You'll see right in front of you, you're not getting very strong reflections, but off to the side, you're picking up a lot of stuff, okay?
I hate that because I got a shorter car.
Mhm.
That glare from the light, like from the sun, it shoots right in my eyes.
So that's what this is controlling, is the Fresnel index of refraction, how that light is bending around that. So I typically, for something like this, I'll just leave it at 1.4. At 1, it's basically like an even reflection. Whatever it is in the front and the sides, it's all the same. So 1.4, leave it like that. So now when I hit the render button again, we're going to get something a little bit different. We're getting a little bit of reflection in here. Okay. Now one thing that we're not going to really see too much is directly right in front of us, that reflection is reflecting basically what's behind us. Okay? So what's behind the ball? Or actually, reflecting into the ball. Well, the backdrop is on this side, reflecting in here, right? What would be reflecting right there? Nothing. Right, the camera. There's no actual camera, so it's not reflecting that. It's just blackness around, so it's not reflecting anything. Now on our lights, so I'm going to zoom back out to get the lights. On each of these lights, there's an option to make it visible. So if I click on my lights and make them visible, what that will do is that it will make them visible so that when I render, we should see a little bit more reflection in there. Okay. Now again, because this is concrete, I don't really want a whole lot of reflection in there, but I know that it is there. Okay. Just to kind of prove that we're getting reflection from the lights in there, it's always good to test it. So I can just crank the reflectivity up, render that out, and I may need to crank the glossiness down just so I can see it. There you go. So you can definitely see some sort of reflection happening right about here. Okay, so I'm just going to crank it back down to what I had before. That should be good. And now I should be able to use that overall bump inside this. So I'm going to go back to the ball. On overall bump, I'm going to click the little mappy button. And this has to be set up manually. So before, on other materials, you could just click File and it would automatically connect all the stuff that needs to be connected. In this, it doesn't. We have to do it manually. So I'm going to go to Utilities right here, and I'm going to say Bump 2D. Then under the bump value, I'm going to click on the map and click on File. Okay, so we clicked on the map for the bump, then we added a bump 2D. We clicked on the value checkerboard, and now we added a file. And then for this, we're going to use, just for now anyway, that concrete image, that same concrete image.
I missed that. Where do we go?
We click on this, and we go down to Overall Bump, and we click the map. And then you go to the, let me delete mine so I can get to it. We go to 2D Utilities, there it is, Bump 2D. All right, now on this, see the quadratic is there again, right? That filter type, turn it off. It looks like it actually has some grit to it. It actually looks like it has some shape to this. Now, this is the simplest form of making a material and assigning it. For many objects in your scene, something like this could be sufficient, okay? For our star objects, or objects that are really close to the camera where we're really seeing them, we have to put more work into it. But for right now, we can see what this looks like. We can see how that concrete looks. And if we like the way this concrete looks, it literally is just a matter of going through and changing out a couple pictures, and we could use this for pretty much any concrete, okay? So let's close the windows and the render editors that are up. Let's save our file, and let's close Maya. All right, so Maya's closed, our stuff's done. We need to back up our work. If next class you come in, your P drive is wiped, you didn't back up your stuff, then you got to recreate all of this stuff, and you don't want to have to do that. Okay? So we have a couple things that we've done. One of them is our preferences, right? We have our Maya preferences that we updated. We made those marking menus. We also created this file. So I'm going to go into my Maya folder here, and I'm going to copy that 2016 file right there. Okay, so I'm just going to hit Control X to cut it out of there, and I'm going to paste it inside my 2520 folder. Okay, so I went onto the P drive, went to the Maya folder, went and grabbed that 2016, and I hit Control X to cut it. I went into my 2520 folder and pasted it. That way my preferences are now with me. They have the same spot as my folder.
What did you put out? You went to 2520?
Yeah, my 2520 folder. So you go to your 2520 folder.
Right, then go to work.
I just pasted it right here because I know that I'm going to be using it often. Okay, so then before you leave, I would throw this folder, your Fall 2016 folder, onto a thumb drive, onto a hard drive, Dropbox it to yourself, whatever you have to do to make sure it's backed up somewhere. That way you have that file, and then when we come in next class, we can copy our stuff correctly, get our preferences back working, and then continue from there. Okay?